The first time Daniel Blackwell cleaned the floor of his own company, a woman accidentally spilled coffee on his shoes. She looked at his old uniform and immediately said, "I'm so sorry, sir." Daniel smiled. "It's okay." She grabbed a tissue and tried to wipe his shoes. But Daniel wasn't looking at the coffee. He was looking at her face. For 20 years, he had searched for one person. And suddenly, she was standing right in front of him. But she didn't recognize him. And that was exactly what broke his heart. Daniel Blackwell was one of the richest men in the country. At 38, he owned hotels, technology companies, restaurants, and several skyscrapers in the heart of New York. People knew him as a cold billionaire CEO who never smiled. Newspapers called him ruthless. Businessmen feared him. Women chased him. But nobody knew why Daniel had never married. Nobody knew why he avoided relationships. And nobody knew about the promise he had made when he was 18. A promise to a girl named Emma. 20 years earlier, Daniel had been poor. He lived with his mother in a tiny apartment above an old bakery. His father had abandoned them when Daniel was 6. His mother worked 2 jobs just to keep food on the table. Daniel had no expensive clothes. No wealthy friends. No future anyone could see. But he had Emma. Emma was the daughter of a struggling single mother. She worked after school and dreamed of becoming a nurse. Daniel and Emma grew up together. They shared cheap sandwiches. They studied under the same street lamp when the electricity in Daniel's apartment was shut off. And when Daniel had nothing, Emma never made him feel poor. One rainy evening, Daniel held her hand and said, "One day, I'll become successful." Emma laughed softly. "You don't have to become rich." "Then what do you want?" Emma looked into his eyes. "I just want someone who stays." Daniel promised her, "I'll always stay." But life had other plans. At 18, Daniel received a scholarship to study business in another state. It was the opportunity of a lifetime. But the night before he left, he went to Emma's house. She wasn't there. Her mother told him Emma had gone to the hospital. Daniel waited. 1 hour. 2 hours. Then 3. Emma never came. The next morning, Daniel had to leave. He wrote her a letter. But before he could give it to her, something terrible happened. Emma and her mother suddenly disappeared. Their apartment was empty. The neighbors knew nothing. The landlord said they had left during the night. Daniel spent years searching. But he found nothing. Eventually, Daniel became successful. Very successful. But he never stopped searching for Emma. Then, 20 years later, he found a clue. A hospital record. Emma's mother had been treated at a small hospital in New York. Daniel followed the trail. And finally, he found Emma. But she was not living the life he imagined. She was working as a cleaning woman in his own company. Daniel could have walked into the building wearing a $5,000 suit. He could have introduced himself as the CEO. Instead, he did something nobody expected. He became a janitor. He wanted to know one thing. Did Emma still have the same heart? Could she love a man who had nothing? So Daniel wore an old uniform. He carried a mop. He cleaned bathrooms. He emptied trash cans. And every morning, Emma smiled at him. "Good morning, Daniel." Daniel froze the first time she said his name. She remembered him. Or so he thought. But then she added, "Daniel is a nice name. My brother used to have that name." His heart sank. "Your brother?" Emma smiled sadly. "No. Sorry. I mean, someone I knew a long time ago." Daniel couldn't breathe. "Do you remember him?" Emma looked away. "I remember everything." Days turned into weeks. Daniel watched Emma quietly. She always helped elderly employees. She bought lunch for workers who couldn't afford it. She never complained about her low salary. And every Friday, Daniel noticed something strange. Emma would take a small envelope from her purse and leave the building. One evening, Daniel followed her. He expected to find a boyfriend. Instead, Emma entered a children's hospital. Daniel followed her inside. And then he saw a little girl lying in a hospital bed. The girl was pale and weak. Emma sat beside her and held her hand. "Mommy is here." Daniel stopped in the doorway. "Mommy." His heart began pounding. The little girl looked at Emma. "Mommy, did you find Daddy?" Emma's eyes filled with tears. "No, sweetheart." "Is he dead?" Emma couldn't answer. The little girl whispered, "I just want to meet him once." Daniel's hands began shaking. He stepped backward. Then Emma suddenly noticed him. "Daniel." He turned around. She walked toward him. What are you doing here? Daniel couldn't speak. Then the little girl asked from the bed. Mommy, who is that? Emma looked at Daniel. And for the first time in 20 years. She said his full name. Daniel Blackwell. Daniel stared at her. You knew. Emma nodded. I knew from the first day. Then why didn't you tell me? Emma started crying. Because I thought you had forgotten me. Forgotten you. Daniel's voice broke. I searched for you for 20 years. Emma covered her face. I searched for you too. Then why did you disappear? Emma looked at the little girl. Because your father came to me. Daniel froze. My father. Emma nodded. He told me that if I stayed with you, he would destroy your future. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. He offered me money. I refused. So what happened? Emma whispered. He threatened my mother. Daniel stood silently. He told me that if I didn't leave, he would make sure you lost your scholarship. Emma's voice trembled. So I left. Daniel stepped closer. You could have told me. I tried. She pulled an old envelope from her purse. Daniel recognized the handwriting immediately. His own handwriting. It was the letter he had written 20 years ago. Emma had kept it. For 20 years. Daniel opened it with shaking hands. Inside were only a few words. Emma, I don't know where life will take me. But wherever I go, I will come back for you. Daniel began crying. You kept this. Emma smiled through her tears. I kept everything. Then Daniel looked at the little girl. How old is she? Emma lowered her eyes. 20. Daniel's heart stopped. 20. Emma nodded. She was born 3 months after you left. Daniel looked at the girl. She had his eyes. His smile. Even the tiny scar above her eyebrow. Daniel whispered. What's her name? Emma answered. Hope. Why Hope? Emma smiled sadly. Because I never stopped hoping you'd come back. Daniel walked toward the bed. The girl looked at him. Are you really my father? Daniel couldn't control his tears. He sat beside her. I wish I had been there. The girl looked away. You weren't. I know. You missed everything. I know. My first birthday. I know. My first day of school. I know. My mother's surgeries. Daniel's tears fell onto his hands. I know. The girl looked at him. Why did you leave us? Daniel shook his head. I didn't. Emma finally spoke. He didn't leave us, sweetheart. She handed Hope the old letter. Your grandfather made sure he never found us. Hope read it. Then she looked at Daniel. And for the first time, she called him by one word. Dad. Daniel broke down. He hugged her like he had been waiting 20 years for that moment. The next morning, Daniel walked into his company wearing his expensive suit. Everyone became silent. The employees stared. The janitor had disappeared. The CEO had returned. Daniel walked to the center of the lobby. Emma stood at the back, confused. Daniel looked at everyone. Then he said, yesterday, many of you looked down on a janitor. Nobody spoke. I want you to remember something. He pointed toward Emma. That woman treated me with more dignity when she thought I was poor than most people treated me when they knew I was rich. He took off his expensive watch and placed it in Emma's hand. This watch costs more than her yearly salary. Emma stared at him. Daniel smiled. But it is worthless compared to the 20 years she spent waiting for me. The room became silent. Then Daniel turned to Emma. I spent 20 years searching for you. He took her hand. And I don't plan to lose another day. Emma cried. So what happens now? Daniel smiled. Now. He looked toward Hope. We go home. 6 months later, Daniel closed his office for one day. He didn't attend a business meeting. He didn't sign a billion-dollar deal. He didn't speak to investors. Instead, he stood in a small garden beside Emma. Hope was there, and Daniel's mother was sitting in the front row. Daniel looked at Emma. You once told me you didn't need a rich man. Emma smiled. I still don't. Daniel laughed. Good. Because I don't want to be your billionaire. He held her hand. I just want to be the man who finally kept his promise. Emma cried. And this time, they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of 20 years finally coming home. That day, Daniel learned the greatest lesson of his life. Money can buy a mansion. It can buy a company. It can buy almost anything. But it cannot buy back the years you lose with the people you love. And sometimes, the person you've been searching for your whole life is standing right in front of you, waiting to see if you'll recognize them. Because true love doesn't always disappear. Sometimes, it simply waits.